Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to have back on the show operational CIA monarch mindslave, survivor, overcomer, and whistleblower, devoted husband and loving father, blogger and content creator, published writer and author, podcast regular, and one of our most requested guests, and a bright light in the darkness, J.R. Sweet. A little bit about JR if you've missed his other episodes discussing his harrowing and inspiring testimony, or if you guys are new here. Raised in a family steeped in the occult, JR's childhood was a labyrinth of abuse orchestrated by the CIA's MKUltra and Monarch programs, designed to create dissociative identity disorder through trauma-based mind control. From birth, he was subjected to incestuous ritual abuse intended to fracture his psyche and mold him into a programmable mind slave. The abuse, cloaked in the guise of religious and familial tradition, was perpetuated by a network that included the LDS Church and Disney, which JR identifies as hubs for programming and child exploitation. His family's lineage, intertwined with elite bloodlines, ensured secrecy through generations with orchestrated ritualistic abuse designed to manufacture terror and loyalty to the group's ideology. JR's memories of these atrocities were buried under layers of dissociation until he was in his 30s, when the truth began to surface like fragments of a long-forgotten nightmare. The awakening was agonizing, confronting the reality of his family's involvement in MKUltra, the cover-ups within religious institutions, and the betrayal of those he trusted. Yet in this reckoning sparked a transformation. JR turned his pain into purpose, launching his website and blog, www.mormonmonarch.com, which has become an incredibly important space where he meticulously documents and shares his experiences, exposing the intersections of MKUltra, satanic ritual abuse, and institutional complicity. His writings are both harrowing and inspiring, offering a raw, unfiltered look at the mechanisms of control and the path to healing. Through appearances on podcasts such as this one, JR has shared his testimony with unflinching courage, detailing the testing and programming protocols for children in Monarch, the role of institutions, the government, and satanic cults in organized child abuse and exploitation, the psychological toll of DID, and so much more. His accounts reveal a chilling reality: the federal government's involvement in child slavery, the use of dissociation to create compliant slaves, and the systemic cover-ups that protect perpetrators. Yet JR's narrative is not one of despair. His faith, resilience, and commitment to his family anchor him as he navigates the complexities of recovery, using his platform to empower others to break free from their own silence. JR's advocacy extends beyond storytelling. As a published author of his new and incredible memoir named after his blog's namesake, The Mormon Monarch, his book further amplifies his message, offering hope to survivors of ritual abuse and mind control. His work challenges the stigma surrounding DID and PTSD, emphasizing that healing is possible through acknowledgement and community. He confronts the societal denial that dismisses survivors as conspiracy theorists, drawing parallels to the satanic panic of the 1980s, which, just like with MKUltra, contained kernels of truth obscured by tons of disinformation. JR's voice is a counterpoint to the skepticism, grounded in lived experience and a deep understanding of the psychological and historical roots of his trauma. His mission is clear: to shine a light on the darkness, to expose the networks of power that thrive on secrecy, and to spare future generations from the horrors he endured. J.R. speaks not just for himself, but for the countless children still trapped in similar systems, urging survivors to reclaim their own power by speaking truth. His blog and podcast appearances are a lifeline for those grappling with their own suppressed memories, offering validation and a roadmap to recovery. Despite the personal cost, familial estrangement, societal gaslighting, and the weight of revisiting trauma, JR remains a warrior driven by a moral imperative to protect the vulnerable. JR's story is a triumph of the strength of the human spirit and a narrative of breaking free from the chains of mind control to become a beacon of hope. His courage in naming the unnameable, Disney, the LDS Church, and the CIA, for example, challenges the fabric of secrecy that protects abusers. To survivors, he offers a powerful message. You are not your abuse. Your voice can dismantle the darkness. Through his love for his family, his faith, and his relentless pursuit of justice, JR transforms pain into purpose, inspiring a movement to end the cycles of abuse and empower survivors to rise as warriors of truth. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple of quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you were interested in submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you guys exclusive discount codes on products I love, such as Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes along with other resources down below in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X, following the extreme censorship that caused my last YouTube channel to be terminated. I've just recently started a new YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I am now streaming new episode premieres from weekly. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and disclosure community. So thank you all on the other side of the screen wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on the show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming back today's guest of honor, Monarch survivor and whistleblower, walking miracle, overcomer, educator, content creator, voice for the voiceless, anti-child abuse and survivor advocate, absolute inspiration, someone I'm honored to call a friend, and a man on a mission to expose crimes against humanity being committed on innocent children and humans by our governments, corporations, and religious institutions, the one, the only, J.R. Sweet. JR, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's an honor to have you back.
Thank you, Emma. It's wonderful to see you again. Yeah, thanks for having me on as well. I appreciate it. I appreciate you giving a voice to these things. So, thank you.
It's my honor. If you can live through it, survive it, and then on top of that, have the courage to come share, the least that we can do is support you and listen. This is really important, the things that you and others are talking about to help lift that veil off that has been so tightly bound on people's eyes. And luckily, so many more people are willing now to start peeling that away. You know, they're not just keeping it on. A lot of people now are starting to acknowledge that these things could have happened and still are. And it's really wonderful to see the support of survivors that is sort of unprecedented. You know, we haven't seen this ever in history. So it's amazing that we can come here and talk about these hard things and have reception from the public. We can give support to survivors. So many more are waking up quicker and quicker and even younger and younger. And it's really important that we empower people helping survivors to know this information and that we give survivors the safety to know how to navigate these really hard things that they're contending with that can be so obscure and confusing and horrifying. So you're so courageous for speaking on this, and my audience just absolutely loves you. You're one of our most requested guests. I get outreach all the time on the difference that you've made with helping people reckon with this. And a lot of people appreciate your gentle nature and talking about such horrible things in a way that they can continue listening to. It's not spoken of in a way that is without love and compassion. You really keep that in your heart and it shows in your message. So it's wonderful to have you back, and I'm going to let you sort of lead the conversation. We have a lot of important things to talk about today, and sort of, I guess, how I can share a big picture maybe is we're just going to kind of lay the foundations of all of this, of your lived experiences and that of so many others, and help share how this kind of all fits together in a lot of different ways and different layers. And I think you do a really great job of doing that for us and sort of connecting the network together, this tapestry that can be so overwhelming for people to take in.
Yeah, it's all very overwhelming. So we'll try. I have some things I want to convey today. I'd just like to talk to folks about. And so thank you again, Emma, for having me on.
You're
Truly,
welcome.
thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
being here.
yeah, you got it. I appreciate it. I want to give people a warning, particular to survivors, before we really dive into it, because these things can be triggering to people. And if you're a survivor and you're watching this show, please be aware that these things can be triggering, and that could be a bad thing for you. So be aware of that. And folks should be 18 or older who are going to be listening to this, because we're going to talk about some very sensitive things that are for mature audiences. So I like to let folks know that before I really get started. Just a warning, we're going to talk about some heavy, heavy shit. So why am I here, Emma? I'm here because of who I am. It's not that I don't want to be here talking with you in particular. I do enjoy talking to you, Emma. I think you're a wonderful person, but I wish I didn't have to be. I wish that I wish that this was not necessary at all. Um, but it is. It is necessary. I'm here because I'm blowing the whistle on the Central Intelligence Agency's trauma-based mind control program. My hope and my goal is to raise conscious awareness in the people, in the population, to what's actually going on in our world and in our government and with these agencies, the CIA in particular. And if we can raise awareness and we can raise people's consciousness and their knowledge of this, then we can bring an end to it. People can decide that they do not want to support this, that they don't want to support the corporations that are doing this, or the politicians, or the various networks and religions that are involved in this. And so they can't make that decision unless they know what's going on. This stuff's very sensitive. It's highly classified and considered top secret. And And that's nice and all, but it's illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's an awful thing that they're doing. And so regardless of how they classify it, we need to talk about it. It needs to be exposed and it needs to come to an end. So that's why I'm here. I'm not a big look at me kind of individual. I just like to live my life. I like to do my job. I like to raise my family, and I'm not doing this for a show. I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing this because it matters and because people have to understand it and learn about it. And I've made it this far. And so it's important to me that this information gets in. So who am I and why should you be listening to what I'm even saying? That's a really good question. And the inquisitive mind should ask that. You should learn to ask those kinds of questions. And so I'm here because I'm a survivor of the Central Intelligence Agency's trauma-based mind control program. That's a lot to take in. I understand that. But people need to learn to take it. A survivor of the Central Intelligence Agency's trauma-based mind control program. So the way that came about is I was born into a incestuous satanic family bloodline. My particular bloodline was hiding in the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's a good place for them to hide because not a whole lot of people would even think about that. That's becoming less and less so as time goes on, and more is coming out about satanic ritual abuse, in particular there in Utah, around the Salt Lake area. There's more and more always coming out, and you can watch what just went down there, and you can see the corruption that takes place there, and how that church owns Utah. It is a huge power base there. So my family was hiding in the Mormon church. Some of them still are. Some of my family members have left the church, but that's how I was raised, was as a kid, as a Mormon. And I thought my life was pretty normal till 2017 when I started to remember all these things. It was far from normal. So a lot of the things I couldn't remember, there was a reason I couldn't remember. They have a process for that. So I was born into a satanic family bloodline that's connected back to King Henry VIII, Emma. It goes way back. And if people research and learn about the bloodlines and the importance of those bloodlines within the satanic elite, they'll be able to research that particular bloodline and gain an understanding of it. I've been working on that, but I can't share too much about that yet because I'm not done with my research. So, but there's reasons that they were interested in my family. Our bloodline is one of them. And so because I'm sorry, the federal government, they have a big interest in those bloodlines for a lot of different reasons. Agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency and even the Pentagon, they have interest in it, and the White House. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that we're really useful for dissociation. That's what I'm going to cover more in this conversation. There's other reasons, but like I said, people should research that and they can learn the relationships of the satanic elite and the satanic bloodlines. So I would highly recommend them. One avenue that's really helpful, Emma, is Fritz Springmeier. Have you ever heard of Fritz Springmeier? Yeah, so he does a really good job of breaking all that down. And he's actually, if you go to the CIA's website, you can download some of his work there because it's just information that is out there, and it is what it is. People should read it and they should understand it. So what I'm going to cover mostly though is dissociation because that's a very important key component in monarch programming, or also known as trauma-based mind control programming. So dissociation is stronger in people who come from a generationally abusive family. I come from a generational generational, it's hard to say it all together, a generationally incestual satanic family bloodline. So my family is very abusive, and it has been for generations. And it's tied in the bloodlines back to King Henry VIII, which opens up a whole other door. And so we were abused as children. I was abused. My siblings were abused. This is verbal abuse. This is mental abuse. Most importantly, this is sexual abuse and physical abuse. And those things are traumatizing for a child. My understanding is the most traumatic thing a child can go through is sexual abuse, incestual sexual abuse. And it causes in the human mind, which cannot take that kind of abuse, that kind of pain, it causes the mind to dissociate, where your conscious mind essentially leaves and your subconscious steps in. And that's what the CIA is interested in, and the feds, is that void where consciousness steps out and they're able to step in. into that subconscious realm and build various personalities for various different things within that individual in that subconscious base. That's something that's very important. So, like I said, my siblings were abused, my father was abused, my grandfather, I believe, was also abused. He would tell me stories of when he was a child, and it sure doesn't sound good. And my grandfather, I believe, is really where the Central Intelligence Agency steps into this in my life, is through my grandfather and his military connections. And so we're going to mostly be talking about the CIA today. I have a relationship with the Mormon Church as well, Emma. I was raised Mormon, like I said, and that church is being controlled by a satanic cabal that is connected to the Central Intelligence Agency. The Mormon Church is very effective through its genealogy work of locating bloodlines, these satanic family bloodlines, and they actively work at covering up incestual pedophilia, abuse, murder, etc., within their own community. And then the CIA is able to select individuals out of that pool that are useful for them in monarch programming and in the trauma-based mind control program. And then after an individual has been programmed, they're useful as a trauma-based mind slave. And then after they become a trauma-based mind slave, they can be used for other things such as assassinations, um, pornography, child pornography, drug smuggling, various operations that the CIA is carrying out. And so I love my country. I've said that before in our last podcast, and I don't know if people can understand that, how someone could live through what I lived through and still love my country. But it's not my country that did to me what was done. It was individuals in our government that are hiding there who are very evil people and are very nefarious and they're traitors. What they're doing is horrible. They want to destroy our government. They do not like the democracy that America is, and they want to enslave the people. And they want power, and those people need to be removed from government. These government programs need to end, and these things need to be exposed because these people are traitors. Traitors against the people, they're traitors against the children of the people. It has to end. And so I love my country, and I'm fighting for my country and my people by raising my voice on these things. I'm not trying to make show, I'm not trying to get attention. I am trying to help my country, exposing what is wrong and what is going on. So I just want people to know that. I love the people of this country. I've traveled all across this country from west to east, and it's just terrible what they're doing. And I want people to be able to understand and to know. Because we're not talking about me, just me. We're talking about a lot of people. My friends were in trauma-based mind control programming. Not all of them, but some of them. Some of them are dead now. Some of their parents are dead because they found out about it. And so this is important. This is highly classified and top secret information. And it's crimes against humanity. It's crimes against the children of humanity. These crimes are being committed by the government, like I said, the Central Intelligence Agency, Pentagon, the White House is involved with this shit. Corporations are involved. The Disney Corporation, in particular, was a big one in my life. Religious institutions such as the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, are also involved. There's a lot of other people involved, a lot of different avenues for moving money, for moving people, for programming. I was put through Monarch programming in a lot of different places. One of them was Disneyland. You'd be programmed with Disney films. Those were great for updating you. You'd be programmed at Disneyland, and then when you went home, all that year you'd be watching Disney cartoons. And those were updates for us. I was programmed on military installations. I remember being programmed in Fort Worth, Texas. Remember being programmed in Idaho, the Idaho National Laboratory. It's located in southern Idaho. It's covered up under the Energy Department. These things are being sponsored by our government, by the CIA. Our tax dollars are paying for it, as well as money that's black money that they earn through selling cocaine, selling people, various means, and it's just disgusting. So the reason that I'm here is because trauma-based mind control the CIA was doing that everyone talks about, MK Ultra, back in the day, everyone knows it as they were testing people with drugs and they didn't know it. And well, they never ended that project. That's a bunch of BS. It's ignorant, it's naive, and it's dangerous to believe that they did because they didn't. They didn't end it. Russia didn't end their trauma-based mind control program. China, North Korea. This is a thing that is occurring across the world. People have to wake up to it. You won't be able to stop this behavior until you do it. It's a weapon. It's a weapon being used against the people of this country and being used against the people of the world. And it's bad. It's a bad thing. It destroys lives. Emma, you and I were talking before we got on the air here about how it destroys families. It just tears families apart. These families, they perceive that they're a healthy family, but there's all these things in them that are nagging away at them all. They're involved with horrible things and they can't even remember it. And it's just so destructive from so many angles. It's also used against people in physical acts, such as mass shootings. People think these mass shootings are just random acts that are occurring. They're not just random acts that are occurring. No, all of them. Some of them, I don't know the answer to that. Some of them may be random acts, but there's a lot of them that aren't random acts. And they're being committed by our own government against the people in order to push the people through trauma. It's horrible. And it's a continuation of trauma-based mind control from an individual to a collective level. And it's being used against people, everyday people. And people need to understand that. It's being used for assassinations. It's being used to make kiddie porn. It's being used to smuggle drugs that the CIA makes money on and individuals in the agency make money on. The satanic elite, a lot of people use drugs. And the satanic elite, the rich, they are no different than the normal people in their desire to do the same thing. Well, the CIA, they provide them with their drugs. What better way to know that you're getting a clean slate of cocaine than to have the CIA provide it for? So it's a bad deal. It's got to be exposed and it's got to end. I know there's a lot of people who have been reading on this subject, Emma, and who know what we're talking about, but there's some people who don't know what we're talking about. This might be the first time someone has seen a video like this, has seen someone even talking about these kinds of things. And so what we're talking about is called trauma-based mind control programming. It's also known as monarch programming. That's a mild way to put it. And it's a form of human slavery. It is a horrid form of human slavery. It is slavery. And slavery didn't end with the 13th Amendment. A lot of people perceive it did, but that was the ending of the open marketplace of human slavery. What I'm talking about is the black marketplace of human slavery and human trafficking. A lot of us have heard about this taking place, such as at the southern border, where people are being trafficked. That's over 300,000 minors that disappeared to who knows where. That is the black market of human trafficking. And the Central Intelligence Agency is involved with this. Religious institutions are involved with this. Walt Disney is involved with this, the Disney Corporation, the CIA, the Pentagon, human trafficking. And one of those things that they are really interested in is creating individuals who are trauma-based mind slaves that they can utilize for various things. And so trauma-based mind control is a form of slavery, but it's involved in the mind losing its free will, and in an individual essentially taking over the use of your mind and your body through your subconscious mind. I remember reading, I think it was Kathy O'Brien, Emma, who discussed in her work the human mind being related to a computer. This makes a lot of sense to me because I grew up in a house where my father, he owned a computer business. And so computers are very familiar to me. Now, you have in a computer an operating system. We have a brain, right? That brain can be shut off or pushed away, such as if you were to go around an operating system in a computer. In that computer are files, various files that can hold within them different apps. Those apps can be accessed and used by people who know how to get to that file and how to know to get to that app. And that app can be hidden on that computer somewhere other than, say, the desktop. And so trauma-based mind control is a lot like that. And what they do is you are abused from the time that you are born. I was anyway. So I'm talking about myself now. I was abused from the time that I was born, sexually, and in various ways. I was made to be involved with all kinds of things. Sexual abuse was a key part of it, as well as being made to be involved with getting rid of people, killing people, satanic rituals, things of that nature. These things drive you to a point of, as we said earlier, disassociation. When you dissociate, it's like you've gone around the operating system of the computer. And you're able to create a file within that brain, within that mind, a file that is hidden that only you know how to access, or anyone else who has the keys to that file within that human mind. So in trauma-based mind control programming, you are constantly being traumatized to the point of dissociation, where they are pushing consciousness out of the way, and they are accessing the subconscious, where they are able to create files with all kinds of different files with all kinds of different uses. And so it is a lot like a computer. I believe it was Kathy O'Brien who talked about it. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. One of my key programmers growing up in my life was Dr. John C. Lilly. And Dr. John C. Lilly, he wrote a book that people can look up for themselves, and they could purchase it on Amazon at Amazon.com, Programming the Human Biocomputer. These things are talked about openly in his book. I don't know if he talks about trauma in that book, but he definitely goes into discussing the human mind and the human body as a human biocomputer and how to program that. This man had a lot of interest in that. And Lily, he was not a good person. He really lacked empathy and a conscience. And I don't want to get too much into that, but that is an interesting way to think about it. But in the end, through this process of trauma and dissociation and accessing the subconscious and creating different personalities or files, as you could call it, in that individual, which you can access, you end up taking away one's free will. Because without consciousness and you are operating on a subconscious basis, you've lost your free will. People will think, well, how could an individual be made to do such horrid things? Well, it's simple conditioning in the end. This isn't rocket science. This is conditioning someone from the time that they are born to perceive something as normal and to create that perception in a space in their mind where they cannot even conceive that such a thing happened. They can't even remember it. It's a whole different part of their mind, which they don't access on a daily basis. It'll nag into you. It'll come in little snippets into your mind and try to nag at you, but it's not there on a conscious level. And so it is a theft of one's free will through the mechanism of sexual, incestual abuse, molestation, rape, torture, all manner of trauma, including murder and cannibalism. And so that is the process. I had these things done to me as a child. That's how I ended up where I was in the Central Intelligence Agency and in my relationship to the Mormon Church. These things were done to cause disassociation because the things are so bad, Emma, and so extreme. Normal people can't even go there in their mind. It's so bad. And they don't want to. Normal, healthy people don't even want to. And I get that. But people are going to have to because there are bad people in the world. And you have to face them and deal with them. So it's a theft of your free will. And with that, I would like to say that it's a theft of your life. Your life is taken in trauma-based mind control and your memory of it. You're not allowed to remember what happened to you. I can remember being on an operation with my handler, and we were in Japan, which I will discuss later in this conversation. And my uncle saying, it's too bad you're not going to be able to remember any of this. And it just hitting me in my mind at that time, even then, what do you mean I won't be able to remember it? Because I was in a completely different personality. And that personality was only so old. It was created for what it was doing. And it was very confusing. Now I understand it, but I remember a lot of that now. They can only compartmentalize your memory. And so I don't want to go too much into what mind control, trauma-based mind control and MK Ultra and Monarch programming are. That's something I do want to cover really quick. So it is the process of causing trauma to the point of disassociation. Once disassociation has occurred, the subconscious mind has stepped in. The CIA in particular is looking at that subconscious void, that subconscious part of the mind, and that's where they're building multiple personalities and causing people to and making people do what they want them to do. That is how it is done. The way that they compartmentalize the memory, they can't erase it entirely. is through various means. They don't do it just through one simple means. One of the means, Emma, is trauma. You know that. Another way is the trauma. I want to elaborate on that a little bit. The trauma is so awful and extreme that, yeah, it's unfathomable. Another thing that they do is they will hypnotize you. Hypnosis is a very important component. I can remember my grandfather carrying a pocket watch with him all the time, and he would use that pocket watch for hypnosis. Hypnosis is very important, hypnotizing you to not remember things. If people research into hypnosis, they will learn that it's not just this thing to be laughed at. It's a very real science, a science of the mind, and it is actually a key component in trauma-based mind control programming and compartmentalizing that memory. Remember to forget that memory. Another thing that they do is they hit you with a stun gun. There's that physical component to it. So you've been traumatized, you have had a program installed within your subconscious of what you will be doing for the agency. They have hypnotized you. They're going to hit you with a stun gun. You pick a spot on your body when you are selected for the project or being sponsored by the CIA in your programming. And that spot for me is on my right thigh. And they would hit you there when you were put through a programming session. That just zapped the living tar out of you and compartmentalized that memory even further. They have this down to a science. So something that I find frustrating is when an individual will be involved with something nefarious, say, let's just say a presidential assassination attempt, and their bodies are disposed of weeks after the event because their body would have markings on it that would be clear indicators that they are a government owned, a CIA owned asset, trauma-based mind slave that's owned by the government. There would be key markings. I have them on me, and other trauma-based mind slaves I know of have it on them. And if it's just disgusting to see that, because people should know that, and they should start demanding for that kind of information. So that is how those things, though, are compartmentalized. So they are creating individuals that they are working for years and years and years on from the time they're born, if not before. And they are working at conditioning and programming them up through adulthood and through adulthood even to do various tasks which are being programmed within their subconscious mind after trauma has been applied. And then they are eliminating, compartmentalizing, I should say, the memory of those events within that individual's mind. So they don't even know that those things are happening to them or that they're involved with anything. They have no idea. Their subconscious mind might nag at them, but until you have a full awakening of what was occurring in your life, then you have no idea who you are, what you were used for, and there's reasons for them. People can learn more about this kind of stuff. Basically, it's a scientifically engineered nightmare. I don't like it. It is very frustrating and infuriating, and I've had to learn to deal with my anger. I've had to learn to deal with pain. These are just things that you have to learn to deal with. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Don't want to be like those people. And so just try hard to deal with them. If people want to learn more about this kind of stuff, they can do research on it. I don't want to go too in depth into all that, but people can do research on it. I have an essay on my own website It's called What is MK Ultra? And people can find that at mormonmonarch.com if they want to look at that. Another individual that you could look into, we've mentioned her, is Kathy O'Brien. She is a survivor and she has a story that people should read and people should understand. And her story is the story that really awakened me to my past and the things that I had lived through because of the connections in her story and my own story, such as individuals such as Bird, Senator Robert Byrd, Charlie Pride, the country musician, and scars on my body, which when I read them in her book, um, took a couple readings over it, but I discovered I had those same scars. And I could remember the events that caused those scars on me. So people should read Kathy's one. Asia Rain is another individual. She is a wonderful person, and people can look up Asia. You can look up Christy Allen. You can look up Eliza E. There's a lot of people out there that people should be looking into and should be researching. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Emma?
Thank you for sharing and breaking that down. This stuff, as many times, even myself, as I have heard this explained in a sense of understanding that it happens and hearing people talk about it, this process, because it was not something I grew up with, it wasn't something I grew up knowing existed. I didn't even find out until my 30s that dissociation existed. I didn't even know what my own body is capable of doing and how
Uh,
memory is stored. I didn't understand the different ways that memory can be stored, traumatic and otherwise. And it's been a huge sort of, gut punch for me, understanding how skewed our education system is and how deliberate the intention has been behind hiding this from us. And it's really important information, even if somebody didn't go through the harsh reality to the degree that you did of abuse and trauma. We've all experienced trauma to some degree. Even dissociation has a sliding scale on how we can experience that, if it's a complete blackout or even, somebody just feeling dissociated from their body if they hear of, say, a death of somebody that they care about. There's different ways that we can sort of experience that, like leaving our body feeling of not knowing how to cope with something that's happening to us or something that happens to somebody close to us, and hearing this, it's just the more that I hear this information broken down, the more I'm convinced that, this part of it is really the most important part, explaining how this happens so we can take that information and relearn how our bodies work and heal ourselves, especially survivors who have gone through extreme trauma and fall into that absolute despair and sadness and anger and all of those emotions that can come up of feeling that sort of power and worth taken from you from having been conditioned. I love that you use the word conditioned because that's what it is, and that can also be hard for people to grapple with that,
yeah,
even from the standpoint of explaining a pedophile, we can people on the outside look at all of these people and that's an easy word that we can throw at them. But when you stand back
yeah,
and understand how this works, you can see that it's actually conditioning. People are doing it not necessarily because they have a sick attraction. Of course, people do, but a lot of this is they're taught that this is how you raise a child. This is what you do, and you pass it down to them. You start at this age, this is what you do. They're trained to condition a child through doing this. It's not necessarily like a random assault that we see in the movies that's how that happens. It's a random thing. It's orchestrated. It's planned out, like you said, from the time that you're born or even before. And they know exactly what they're going to do at what age. And then you're taught, not you, but then the person that they're doing it to is taught how to do that to their children. So it's a conditioning from birth to continue a cycle, and so somebody like you comes along eventually and it doesn't sit well with them. They're unbreakable. They don't conform to it, and I was saying before we started talking, I am constantly grappling with that. What what is it in somebody like you versus all the other people in your entire lineage that never walked away from it? What was it in you that caused you to? Despite all that conditioning, the generations of it being passed down, right in your own family, you had siblings that went through it. And so thinking, what is it within a person that doesn't conform to that and how special that is that we have you on the side of it, being able to educate us on it. But I just, going back to my original point, I really appreciate you breaking this down because we're taught that that the worst abuse that happens is random. We're taught stranger danger, that we have to be aware of people that we don't know around us that can perpetuate danger, and that's who our enemy is. It's not people that we know and that are around our children. It's people that we don't know that are going to assault us or hurt us. And what we find through listening to actual abuse testimonies from victims and survivors is that it's the complete opposite. There's only a small fraction of these scenarios that happen randomly. Typically, it's people that the child knows, it's family, which can be,
Yeah,
and like you said, it's the most heinous betrayal. There's nothing that betrays a child more than a parent, especially a parent or somebody in their immediate family,
yeah,
perpetuating
grandparent.
sexual abuse on them, and it's just so foreign to society. So this conversation is so important. I just really appreciate how you're able to put context and words to it and explain it this way. Because it's really, that's the biggest hidden truth is that trafficking isn't something that's just, of course, it's happening behind the scenes, but they want it to be in public. They send you to school. They put you in public. Like you're not being just hidden and abused. You are being abused in private, but you're living in an entire life publicly and nobody knows. You're going to church, you're going to school. And so it's this invisible crime that's happening right in front of our eyes and we can't even see it because we don't know what we're looking at?
Yeah, you don't know how to see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And to add to that, a lot of people are involved, including the school system and your church. For me, that's how it was. I would go to school and I would be put through programming at school. They would call it this special class, and you'd be taken back to a room where it didn't have any windows in it. There was a two-way mirror, and you'd always have to sit down in this little cubicle. And I had this little hourglass that I'd have to turn over. And then there was a device with headphones, and I'd have to put those on, but they wouldn't make a sound that I could hear. It made a sound that you I can't say a sound. It did something I couldn't hear. And then I had a folder that I was always working on. I remember that it was like a continuous thing every year at school. You'd get a folder, and that was your folder for the year. And you'd be made to work through that in the amount of time that you had with those headphones on. First time I put those headphones on, I looked at the gal working in there and I said, I can't hear anything. It's not working. And she said, No, it's working. You won't hear it, but it's going into your mind. And it was this little device that I had to turn on and put the headphones on. And that room, that was tended by a woman who was some kind of, she wasn't a teacher. Everyone kind of referred to her more as like a state employee or something. I don't know. But she wasn't looked at as a normal teacher. And so it happened at school too. Or I was taken
Was
to a
that like a gifted
government,
and talented program?
I don't know what to call it, Emma. I remember they said I had trouble with reading. And so I was taken to this other class where everyone could see you. It was like in the corner with glass walls,
Yeah.
and you'd sit there. You'd always be taken out of your normal class and taken to this class, and then you'd sit down and you'd work on something, and then someone would come and get you and take you back to that room where you would be put through that programming. And so they were able to layer it that way where everyone thinks you're just going to this class, work on your reading, but then they'd come get you from that class and take you back to this other room. And so, yeah, it happened at school. It happened at church. Bad things would happen at church. They would use it to control us. Satanic ritual abuse. I can remember being involved in that as a child. And so they control you through a lot of different avenues. That way they can enter the full scope of your mind. You're not safe at home because you're abused at home. Your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they all might be abusing you. And then you also include the school system where you go every day. You include your church, all those different avenues. And then your government even is in on it. So it's really a mind bender when you're a kid and you're going through all that stuff. And so they use a lot of different faucets and a lot of different avenues in order to keep control of your mind and make you feel like it's always hopeless. You could never raise your voice. You could never get away. I can remember you can run, but you can never hide, something like that. They just ingrain that into you that you can never get away, you can never hide. And that's part of what the harassments are about that they use for harassing me is to let you know you can't hide. We know where you are. We know what you're saying. We know what you're doing. So, yeah. Reason for it all, though, Emma, that's something I wanted to talk about today. you know, these things are going on. What are they doing with it? I can talk about what I can remember in my experience, what they did with me. Because throughout childhood, I was, tortured, traumatized, programmed, conditioned to dissociate. They would program you to do things. As a kid, I was made to do porn, kiddie porn. It was horrible. And then they would make you kill people. They would make you indulge in cannibalism, consumption of human blood. And all that was working you up in your life to do something for them later, though. It wasn't just that they were doing that to have a merry old time, as sick as they are. It was because they were conditioning you for when you were selected, for example, to be purchased by the agency, or when you are selected for special operations, for CIA Black Ops in particular, in my case. So I was selected for CIA Black Ops. The man who selected me was Dick Cheney. He wasn't the vice president yet. He was just going to go work for Halliburton when he selected me. He'd just gotten that job and he was going to be leaving his all the government stuff for a while and go work for Halliburton. And so they wanted to run me through quick. I was only 17. They really wanted to run me through because they wanted to ensure that I would be selected. This was my family pushing it, my grandfather. And so I was selected by Dick Cheney. I was made to do some awful things. It was tested for my ability to dissociate and to do what they wanted me to do. And so in that test, I was made to murder a girl from the local high school here where I live. And that's a horrible memory. And people can read about that on my website in my journal memories. I don't want to talk about it too much here. It's under Pentagon level testing. So I was selected for CIA Black Ops because of my strong ability for dissociation, my family's connections and bloodlines, and ability to forget things. They had it down to a science for my skills at doing what they had programmed me to do. So I was used for a lot of things growing up. I was used, like I said, for porn. And then I was used to handle other people in the network. I just published a memory I had of being involved with handling Leonardo DiCaprio. People can read about that. In that journal memory, I'm not trying to gossip about Leo. I just feel like people should understand that the people in Hollywood, a lot of them are mind slaves. and they're being used to make money for their handlers and to create social engineering avenues through Hollywood. The story is very important that's carried through the American psyche, and Hollywood helps to carry that storyline forward. It's very important for the agency, for the satanic elite, to keep everyone moving in the same direction under the same storyline. And so those individuals are very useful. But it's a sad deal. So I was used to handle people, and I was used to kill people. I was made to get rid of a lot of people in this world. I know that I was made to kill over 20 people in my lifetime, which is a horrible, horrible thing to know. One of those people was an individual. I was involved with his assassination. This occurred in Japan. It occurred in Kobe, Japan. And the year was 1997. It was late August. I was young. Oh, I was a young man then, Emma. And they had decided that they wanted to use me in that operation. There was another individual that was a friend of mine who was a mind slave they had considered using, but they selected me. And so I was involved with that. This was in the murder of Masaru Takumi of Japan. He's involved in the Yakuza. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not very good at pronouncing things. But he's was involved with a Yakuza called the Yamaguchi Gumi. And he was, my understanding, is second in command. He was in charge of money somehow within the Yakuza. And the CIA wanted to get rid of him. The reason the CIA wanted to get rid of Mr. Takumi was because he had been involved in funding the 1995 gassing of the Tokyo subway system. This occurred early in 95 in the spring, I believe. And I don't think he knew he had funded such a thing. People who did that, that was the Om Shinrikyo cult out of Japan there. And that cult was an asset of the CIA. Those people at the head of that cult were mind slaves, trauma-based mind slaves. And they ended up gassing the Tokyo subway system. The reason that they did it was to cover up the economic changes that were happening in Japan at that time. There were economic changes occurring in Japan, something to do with their money. All I know about that is what I can remember. Some kind of change occurring in the monetary system in Japan. And the people in Japan, it had been the way it was for years, and they were resistant to it. And so they caused this huge traumatic distraction, essentially, by gassing the Tokyo subway system, and everyone took their mind off of the economic changes that were occurring in Japan. And they were able to move that through the system. So Takumi was inadvertently involved with funding that cult, the Aum Shinrikyo, and the gassing of the Tokyo subway system. So I don't think he knew it. The money was moved through his mistress, whose brother was Hideki Seijo. He's this musicianist, this guy, this like pop guy, I do believe, that was in Japan. And he was a big thing, Hideki Seijo. And he would move the money to the cult. So he was, I don't know if I could say he was a follower of the cult, but he believed in what it was doing. And he wanted to give money to it, donations. Or so he thought, because Hideki Seijo, Emma, was also a CIA-owned trauma-based mind slave. This is how all this stuff works. And so the money was being funneled through this CIA asset, Hideki Seijo, his sister, who was married, not married, I don't think they were married. I know she was his mistress. Through her, from Takumi, she would ask him for money to give to her brother, and then her brother would give it to the cult, and then the cult would use it to do its nefarious things and to sponsor the cult. And one of the things they did was buy the gas that they used to gas the Tokyo subway system. And that gas, I will add, it's a full circle because that gas was bought from the United States Pentagon. And so the money went right back to the damn feds at the Pentagon. And they're very smart and they're very cunning and they know how to work those angles. And so they wanted Takumi dead because they didn't want any of this to ever come out. When I started to remember this stuff, Hideki Seijo died of a heart attack. Within 3, maybe 4 weeks, he died of a heart attack. I felt terrible because I had been remembering these things. I had talked to some people about it. They're always watching you. And then later, a couple months later, I believe it was, they executed every living member of the cult that they had in prison. They got rid of them all. The leader of it, all of them. They killed them all. There was 12 or 13 of them, I forget. And they all died. I believe that was in July of that year, or maybe they did it in 2 different intervals. I forget. They killed them all within months of me remembering these things. And they wanted Takumi dead back in 97. They'd wanted him dead for a while, and they'd been trying to figure out how to do it. But he was a very powerful man in Japan. He had his own gang that I forget its name, but he had his own gang, and that was like 1,000 members strong. And then you include the Yamaguchi Gumi gang; it's huge, one of the biggest in the world. And so they did not want this stuff coming out because the CIA, um, they could be led to through clues, and so they wanted him dead. And so I was brought in as a shooter in order to be involved with assassinating Takumi. So the way that this worked, I'm going to try not to get too in depth into this because I could talk about this experience for a very long time. But the way that it worked is I was taken on a plane from Boise, Idaho. I would go visit the airport. I will explain how this occurred. I need to digress just a little bit then. So at that time, I believe it was July 1997, I wanted to go and climb the Grand Teton. It's a mountain in Wyoming, the second highest in Wyoming. This is part of my life, my base personality life. I wanted to go climb, and I was going to spend about 2, 3 weeks on a climbing trip around Wyoming, climbing various peaks. One of those was the Grand Teton. My uncle didn't want me gone that long because we had to train for going to Japan and being involved with Takumi's assassination. So he didn't want me gone that long. So when my friends and I left Idaho to go to uh, climbing in Wyoming, we first went to Stanley, Idaho, because my friend, he had to keep an eye on his sister. That was the deal with his parents. He had to keep an eye on his sister for one night because she wanted to go camping with her boyfriend in Stanley. So we stayed the night there. The next day, my uncle, before I had left on this trip, had called me, told me he wanted to talk to me. I was supposed to stop by his house on my way to Wyoming. So after Stanley, we came down from Stanley and we went to Ketchum because that's where my uncle lived. It's about an hour south of Stanley. So we went down to Ketchum and then Haley. He actually lived in Haley, Idaho at the time, which is south of Ketchum and Sun Valley. And we went to his house. My friends, they stayed in the car. I don't believe they came inside, not for this conversation, because my uncle talked to me and told me I had to be back after a week or so. He didn't want me gone long. He said I could climb the Grand Teton and then I had to get myself back to Idaho because we had to train for the op in Japan. So to cut a long story short, we ended up climbing the Grand Teton. I was able to get back to Idaho. I cut the trip short through various means. People can read about that in my journal memories on my book or website. And we trained for this operation. When I got back to Idaho after Wyoming, didn't have a job because I'd been working at Blimpies. I was young, I was a kid then. I've been working at Blimpies making sandwiches. And so I quit my job before I left because I wanted to be gone and be carefree for 2, 3, however long I wanted. And so I'd quit my job at Blimpies. And when I came back, my buddy, one of my buddies, was wanted to quit his job at a local Italian restaurant. And so I applied for that position because it seemed like it was part of his role to help find someone to fill that position. He talked to me about it because he knew I needed a job and I love pizza and Italian food. I still do today. So, yeah, so I ended up getting a job at Noodles as a pizza cook. With that job at Noodles, I had to train in Boise, Idaho. My permanent job was going to be located in Nampa, the town I lived in, but I had to train in Boise. Out of Boise is a major airport, and that's where we flew out of to Japan. So I would drive to Boise to go to my job training. And then my uncle, we would go out up a place called, I believe it was Roby Creek outside of town, and we would train for this operation up Roby Creek. And there was another individual involved. Her name was Kat, and she would be out there and she would train with us as well. And I've been working through that more. That's something I'll include in the second edition of my book because I've been remembering that. And that's something I'd like to talk about with folks because it is interesting. And they're physical locations. I was able to look it up on Google Earth and be like, there it is. There's the spot right there. That's where we used to train for this operation. And then I can remember taking various ways out of there, all kinds of different things. So pretty
Was
interesting.
there a facility there or anything, or was it just a big chunk of land that was private?
It was a big chunk of land that I don't believe was private. I think it was public land.
Wow.
Yeah. And we would train for the pendulum swing off of this giant tree that was down in this big gully. And there was a little bridge across the gully, and we would practice our pendulum swing there. It's not always the scale of what you're doing so much as the process getting nailed down. And so we use this environment to nail down what's called the pendulum swing and how we were going to do that and accomplish that in Japan to move from one rooftop of a building to another because we used the pendulum swing system in order to quickly move through terrain that was difficult and slow to climb. And it was a quick way to get from point A to point B. And so we trained for that up there. And then my uncle would always also put Kat and I through some other programming and stuff up there. But yeah, that's a whole different story. So we trained up there. And then when it came time to actually go on the operation, we left on the op the day my last day of training in Boise, Idaho at Noodles there in downtown. So I trained down there for 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, we were constantly training out up Roby Creek. And at some time before this, I see some weird things that happened because the way that I started to even remember this memory, Emma, is I could remember going to the Boise airport and reading my Bible. I would go to the Boise airport, sit in the waiting area, and read my New Testament. And I could always remember that I would go there and just sit there and read. And it was summer, so it was really hot. I had an old 1966 Volkswagen camper van, and it didn't have very good AC. It didn't have AC at all, I don't believe. And so that thing was very warm. And so it was nice in my mind. I perceived it that it was nice to go sit in the air conditioned airport. It was quiet. I didn't know anyone in there. No one would bother me. I was raised in a really big Mormon family. I have there's 4 other kids including me and the family. And so it was a place I could find solitude. It was quiet. I could read from my Bible. This was how I had perceived that. Well, that wasn't what was going on. I was programmed to go to the Boise airport and sit down and read from my Bible. I can remember going there, sitting down, reading from my Bible, getting up, going to the restroom. When I came out of the restroom, there were some chairs in front of me and a table and a plant. And on that table there with the plant was an airplane ticket. And I said, "Oh, look, there's a plane ticket," when I came out. And I was really curious. And my mind was nagging at me because I'd been through programming that this was all going to take place and to make it go down. And what this was a test run to see how I did by myself with no handler present, in them being able for me to go to the location they needed, sit where they needed me, be dressed how they needed me, and then for them to come and get me on my flight over to Japan. And so this was a test run. So I sat down next to this airplane ticket and I was really curious about it. I didn't touch it for a while. I just kind of sat there. And then after about 10, 15 minutes, I was like, well, no one's coming. At least I think that's how much time passed. No one's coming to get it. And so I picked it up and started to look at it. It was already expired. So I was like, yeah, someone just left their plane ticket. So I got up and I drove back to my parents' house where I live. Well, I can remember going through meeting with my uncle and giving him that ticket and having followed my orders and my directive and him being very happy with me. And the next time I would go to Japan, it was for the operation. It was, we're going out of town. And so it was my last day of working in Boise. I can remember driving over to Boise and I could hardly see. My eyes were so sensitive that morning. I had these sunglasses. They were round. They were like John Lennon sunglasses and they were red. And I was wearing those driving my van over to Boise. I was this little hippie looking kid. And I could hardly see though. My eyes were so sensitive. And it's most likely because of the programming that I'd been put through the night before and the electrocution. But I drove over to Boise. I went to work. Another thing I experienced that day was my body temps were off. I can remember wearing a sweater, and this was in August in Boise, Idaho. It is so wicked hot in Boise, Idaho in August, and I was wearing a sweater and I was going to do the lunch shift. And so I went to work. I had to walk there. I parked at an Albertsons in town because it was hard to park in downtown Boise. And then I had to walk. And so I'm walking down the street with this black sweater on, of all things. And I went to work. And I can remember that day at work, I was off. And my coworker, who had been training me for the 2 weeks, was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I just told him I was tired and I told him how excited I was to go to the Boise airport and to sit down and read my Bible. And he thought that was very strange. He didn't know what to make of that. I think he just figured I didn't feel well. And I told him I didn't feel well. So after work that day, I left and I walked back over to my van and I went straight to the Boise airport. And I got a ticket for parking because you had to get a ticket for parking. And that's one of the clues that gave all this away to me. Um, Almost gave it all away in the experience. Their mind control programming is very strong, and all this didn't come together until I started to journal this out. And so I got a parking ticket, and I went inside and I went and I parked my van. Now I was wearing work clothes. I brought a change of clothes, and so I changed into other clothes. I had a white shirt, much like this one, just a white shirt, and I had a belt buckle that I had gotten on a trip with my grandparents back east, the trip where I met Charlie Pride, met with Bird, and I'd gotten this belt buckle at a war memorial. It was a battlefield of some kind. I haven't journaled all that out. I just remember getting this Civil War belt buckle. It said U.S. on it. And it was this big cowboy style replica of Union soldiers' belt buckle. And I also had a belt that had my grandfather's name on it because they'd used different aliases for me. My alias was Mark on that trip. And so that was interesting. And then I had my John Lennon sunglasses on. And I went inside, parked my van, go inside, go up, and I sit down, and I've got my Bible. And I don't know how long I sat there. I read my Bible for a little while, then I put it down. And I don't know how long I was there, just sitting there watching the planes. And then my uncle came from behind me, and he was with another gentleman. And it was like, oh, hey, at first you're like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? I remember being really messed up that day because I was following a program. And so it seems like I was moving through personalities even as all this was going down. And I saw my uncle, and even people can be a trigger in these things. People talk about using words for triggers or hand symbology for triggers, but even seeing an individual in a certain situation can be a trigger. So I remember my uncle came. He was with this gentleman who was the luggage handler. He was in charge of the luggage handling in the airport, the Boise airport. And my uncle told me I had to go with this guy because we had to go load up the plane. And so me and this guy, I don't remember his name, but he was a bigger gentleman, probably in his, I would say, early 30s, I would say, and maybe late 20s. And I went with him, and we walked through the back ways of the airport. I don't even know how to describe it because I don't remember a whole lot of getting there. I just remember we took the back ways, and then we were in a room with a big roll up door, and there was a cart that you'd load up luggage on that you always see in like the movies, or if you go to the airport, they have these carts that haul your luggage around to the plane. And there was this luggage cart, and we loaded up this luggage cart because the Central Intelligence Agency used the Boise airport. They controlled the people who owned the Boise airport, or who they controlled through blackmail the people who are in charge of operating the Boise airport. And so this Boise airport is an asset to the Central Intelligence Agency. And they were able to store items that would be used globally or domestically in that airport at a back part of the luggage department. And so we loaded all of our gear for this operation we were going to do over in Kobe, Japan. We loaded it all onto these carts, and then we loaded it all on the carts, and then we took it out to the plane. Now, during this process, I can remember some key events occurring. So this individual, this luggage handler, he smoked cigarettes, and then this other guy who was his minion of sorts also smoked cigarettes. And the younger guy asked this older gentleman if he couldn't bum a cigarette. And I saw this occur, and there's a part of me that enjoys smoking cigarettes. And because I'd been made to do so since I was a child, that was part of my programming, actually. I can remember the first cigarette I had was in Disneyland. And so I asked too, can I have a cigarette? I wouldn't mind one. And so we all three had a cigarette. We're loading the plane. Well, time passed, and this younger gentleman said to the older gentleman, can I bum another cigarette? And he promised he'd buy him more the next day because you could see this was going to be a continual thing for the two of them. Because the other guy, he couldn't afford to buy him that day or something. He didn't have any, but they were both chain smokers. And so then I asked, can I bum a cigarette? And at first he was a little frustrated and he started to give me one. And then he said, no, I'm not giving you one. He said, you're a chosen one. You're not supposed to have one. And then he put it away, and he lit up his own, and he became very angry, and he started to tell this other guy who worked for him about who I was as a mind slave. And this young guy, he was just like, what is going on? He had no idea. And this guy's saying he's trauma-based mind slave. He was abused. You know, people know about this stuff and they don't talk about it. It's they know about it. And so he was talking about me right there in front of this guy. And I just was dissociated from the situation. I just started to dissociate deeper because I was already in an operational personality. And this guy said, "Watch, I'll show you. He can deal with pain. Watch what happens when I burn him with my cigarette." And he pulled my shirt open and he took his cigarette cherry and he pushed it into my chest right over here. And he burned into my chest with his cigarette cherry. And I just disassociated from the situation because that's what you do when you're a trauma-based mind slave. I just dealt with the pain. I didn't do anything. I just sat there and let him burn a hole in my chest. And then the young guy, he was just freaked out. Well, it seemed like that older gentleman realized what he was doing because he stopped and he pulled the cigarette away, told me to, do your shirt back up, and just acted kind of strange, like, oh shit, what have I done, kind of a thing. And so we finished loading up the stuff, and they loaded me on the cart with the luggage because I was pretty much luggage for these people. And so they loaded me onto the luggage cart, and we rode across the tarmac, across the airport runways, and we went to an area, believe it was at McGowan Field. See, McGowan Field is located directly across from the Boise Airport. They're connected right there. And we rode over to this military transport plane, and it was a big plane, not huge. I don't think it was the biggest one they got, but this sucker was big. And they pulled it around there. We loaded up our gear. Well, the guy started to load it up. My uncle came out of the plane. He'd gone around and finished filling out his paperwork or whatever for getting the plane. And then we loaded up on the plane, and the other guys loaded our gear. And Kat was on the plane. The guy flying the plane was this guy that I had seen before earlier in life. There's this network of people you're always running into. And so this individual, I knew who he was. I'd seen him before. They call him my cousin. People in the network are off in the CIA network are all often called cousins. You're all a member of the familia. And so my cousin John, he was driving the plane or flying it, I should say, and another individual. And then Kat, she was in the back. Well, my uncle, he saw my shirt that something was starting to stain through on my shirt, and he got really pissed. He didn't get pissed at first. He said, "What is that? What happened to your shirt? What is going on?" And I was in the state of mind you were in. You did exactly what you were told. If that included talking and saying what happened, you said exactly what happened. I said, "That gentleman out there, he burned me with his cigarette." Um, and my uncle just freaked out. He was so pissed when he heard what had happened because that individual could have jeopardized the entire operation by doing that to me, by essentially torturing me and damaging a U.S. government asset. And so my uncle, he went out and he chewed their ass. And my uncle, when he would get mad, you didn't want to be on the receiving end of it. He could get mad. And he was all coked out because he loved his cocaine, especially when he was doing operations like this. And he went out there and he just chewed that guy's ass. Well, Kat and I, we sat down, and Kat bandaged up my chest. We had to get it taken care of. And she put some kind of an ointment on it to help it scar less. You can see the scar on my chest, and it's there. It's not as bold as it could be if they hadn't addressed it, but it's there. And so then my uncle came back in and he was all pissed, said how that guy was all screwed. And because my grandparents were on a mission at that time, to add to this, this individual had not only damaged a government asset, he had scarred a chosen one, because I'm considered what's called a chosen one. And your scars, in particular, going back to what we were talking about earlier, are very definitive. And so those scars label you. And to have someone scar a chosen one, that's a bad deal. That's a death sentence for you. If you know better and you do that, you're in trouble because we would end up getting rid of this individual when my grandfather, who was also involved in all this stuff, would come back from his mission. I believe he was down in Texas, and he came back from his mission later that year in the fall, and we went and we got rid of that guy as well as his daughter. No one was spared in that. He had had a daughter with my ex-girlfriend because he had gotten a job at the same furniture store that I had worked at, that my girlfriend's father owned. And so when I had left, this individual, I'm almost positive he came in right after me. And then he got into a relationship with my ex-girlfriend because we broke up. And so this guy, he was very a very forward fellow. And so he worked his way into her life. They ended up having a child together. They didn't want her to even remember having the child, Emma. And so this child was hidden from even her after it was born. And his, the little girl lived with this man, her father, who lived in a trailer in this part of town there in Nampa by the Nampa airport in this manufactured home. And so we'd end up getting rid of that guy and that little girl at that time. It was a really bad experience, and I won't cover that much more than what I just said. This guy would pay for what he did, and so we took off. They would always give me drugs. They gave me a drug to fall asleep on that flight. They'd make you sleep through the flights and stuff. When you weren't being used or operational, you'd be put to sleep. And so there was this blue drug. All the drugs that they would give me would be color coded. We call them potions. My uncle had this little black box that he would keep them in with this little cork on them, and you'd drink the potion. And stuff was potent. I'll tell you what. You'd drink that stuff, and yeah, there was going to be no staying awake for you. And so I slept on the flight. I woke up on the flight because it wore off at some point. I don't know where. I just woke up, and my uncle, he was abusing Kat. Kat was this nice gal, yeah, from Europe. I'm not sure entirely where in Europe, but she was from Europe, and that's a whole long story, but he was abusing her. And I said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he said, "I'm programming this bitch. What does it look like?" And that was a very bad experience. And I was in a very bad state of mind. If I was in the state of mind I carry these days, I would have thrown his ass right out of that plane. And so that was a bad deal. I ended up going back to sleep, more drugs. We landed in Japan, and when we landed, I was asleep. So I woke up, just the plane was just sitting there, and it was darker outside, seemed really misty, and I could hear people. And I was in the black back of the plane by myself. And I looked out the window and I could see these people out there in these uniforms of some kind. And they were unloading the plane, and my uncle was out there talking to them. And I can remember one of them looking up and saying, "Hey, he's awake, he's awake." But they weren't Americans, and they were Japanese, is what I would learn as time went on. And they were shorter than my uncle, smaller people. And so my uncle, he saw I was awake, and he came in and he administered more drugs to me. I asked where Kat was, where's Kat at? And she'd been sent into the city to work on setting up for the operation because we had to set up a shoot nest where we would shoot from. They ended up putting me in a piece of mechanical equipment on a rooftop of a building there in Kobe. Yeah, just right inside the equipment. And that's where I was able to shoot from at the Oriental Hotel there in Kobe, where Masaru was. And So Kat, she was in the city getting set up, and my uncle and I, we ended up coming out of the plane. The Japanese folks were very respectful. The thing with it, Emma, is these people were also CIA assets, but the agency didn't control that airport. To my knowledge, they did not. And so we had to be really careful getting me into the airport and getting me through all that because we didn't want to get caught. And so the people we were working with, they knew who we were. They didn't quite understand what we were about. They perceived it that we were going to kill Masaru and get rid of that guy, but they didn't understand that Masaru had been used by the CIA and they were actually working for the ones that had caused all the trouble to begin with, and that Masaru was just someone they were getting rid of to keep it all secret. They thought he had, they thought that he had been involved with funding that gas thing, and they were glad to see him go because that's what they've been told, but that was not the case. And so we ended up getting me into the airport. That we had to go through the airport. I was led through the airport by this young gal, female there from there in Japan. And this man that was the head of the luggage people, uh, a lot of their family, it seemed like, were working there all together. And this woman was involved with that family. And we got me through the airport and to a spot where they just set me down in the waiting area in Japan now. So I just went from Boise, sitting in the waiting area, reading my Bible. My Bible went the whole way from work and Noodles to the airport to Kobe. Now here I am in Kobe. I'm sitting there reading the same Bible and I'm reading the New Testament. And then my uncle comes up to me and starts talking to me. And then we went and we had a vehicle waiting for us. It was a government vehicle. And that we loaded that with all of our equipment. So we went from that waiting area to our vehicle, which was just outside, drove it down and around, and we loaded up the vehicle with all of our supplies, our equipment, our gear. My uncle had his cocaine hidden in there. One of the first things he did, the Japanese folks, they loaded up our truck for us, and I was made to pretty much sit in the truck. I like to get out and talk to people, but I was told to just sit in the truck. I think I got out, and then I was told to get back in the truck. Then my uncle got out, and he talked to some people, and he told them how I wanted it organized. And then he was able to get his coke. He had a little thing full of cocaine, and then he came up into the front of the vehicle. And this vehicle had a big compartment in the back, a big area, and then a little doorway, and then our seats up the front. And so we could move back and forth through the vehicle through it. And so we sat there, and my uncle did cocaine, and then he gave me more drugs. It was war on drugs. That when Kathy O'Brien talks about that war on drugs, she ain't kidding. Because, yeah, you are so hyped up on drugs. And then we went from there, from the airport, loading up our gear to a warehouse. And at that warehouse, there was a warehouse there by the ocean somewhere, and that warehouse was scheduled for demolition. And so we went in this warehouse. It was pretty empty in there. There was a little bit of stuff in there, but not much stuff. We went back in there and we parked the van, and then oh, and I remember driving the van. My uncle made me drive it. And I was like, Gail, I'm so hyped up on drugs right now. How am I supposed to drive this van? And he was like, just drive. Let's go. Yeah. So we're all hyped up on drugs, driving this van around Japan. And we went to this warehouse and we parked in there and we ate lunch. Well, I ate lunch. I can remember eating MREs. My uncle, he was going to go into the city to meet with Kat. And so he was going to go eat somewhere nice. But I ate MREs. I think two of them. And yeah, just gross food. But then at that time, that's what you ate. I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, yeah, give me my MREs. And we unloaded the van. We had these black card cases that all of our gear was stored in. I want to say they're a lot like what's called, I believe, a Pelican case, these black hard cases. and that's why we stored all our gear in. And so we got all our gear out of the van, went through it, put everything in there, and organized it how we wanted it. And then we took these hard cases that we didn't want taking up all the space in the van, and we put them, we hid them at the back of the warehouse. So this warehouse was scheduled for demolition, and so people weren't using it. I can remember the roof was falling in part of it. No one would ever think in this dark corner of this place to find this kind of stuff. And they couldn't see us doing it either, Emma. That's another key, is if there were planes, helicopters, anything in the sky, you wouldn't see what we were doing, or from the sides. We were well hidden in there. And then I was put to sleep after I'd eaten my MREs because my uncle had to go into the city. And I don't know how long I was asleep for. The next thing I remember is waking up in the van, and just it was dark. I was like, where on earth am I? And I could hear my uncle, and he was talking to somebody over the comm system in the back of the van. I could hear it. And I started to wake up. And I can remember at that time, it was really strange because in that personality, I knew what we were doing. I knew that my family was involved with these things. I knew that this is what my family did for the federal government, that that was our contribution as a family to the CIA, to the Pentagon, to the feds, to the White House. That was our contribution is we went in and we got rid of people. And I could remember all of that. And that's just how it was. And some in the family knew and some didn't. Some of my brothers and sisters have no idea. All of them, I would say, in their conscious state of mind, and even in a subconscious state, they wouldn't even know because it would be hidden from them. This stuff's all compartmentalized, even within the families. But I was a part of that part of the family where we were used to get rid of people. And so my uncle was there. He was talking to Kat on the comm system. Kat was up on the building somewhere. We were deep in the city of Kobe in a van in a dark alley. And my uncle got me moving. He gave me more drugs to wake me up, got me all hyped up again on drugs. We got me into my operational suit. I was made to put on this one-piece suit with no markings. You're not allowed to have any markings of any kind. This is just a generic, straight suit. It was a one piece, and that was it. I wasn't even allowed to wear my underpants, Emma, because they didn't want anything that could identify you as an individual. So you were stripped of everything and put into this uniform with no markings. They did give me nice boots. And then we were harnessed up, and my uncle, he had these devices that were made for suctioning cupping basically to glass. And we were next to a glass building. We were parked in the alley by a big glass skyscraper. And we would attach to those suction cups, which were electronically controlled. You didn't have to sit there and pump it or anything like that. You put it on, and it would attach to the glass. And then you had a strap with a carabiner that you'd be able to stand in, and you're attached to two of these. You got two of them. And you'd attach one, you'd stand up. You'd attach another, stand up. And you'd basically be able to walk up the building this way. And I was attached to my uncle. My uncle did the same thing. And we were able to, we did a test first to make sure everything was working. And then up we went and we ascended this building. And it's a lengthy process, it's not super fast. So we go up this building, and I can remember getting up there, and we reached an area where it was a divide between two buildings, and we had to get across it. And this is where the pendulum jump was set up that we had been practicing in the Boise Valley. There was this big, great big sign up above on the wall of this giant building, and we were way above the city. I can remember looking down, and I wasn't afraid of heights in that personality at all. It was like, oh, cool, we are way the hell up here. And my uncle, he called in to Kat. She was across on the other building's top. And he called into her, said we were over there. We'd reached that point. And then she came over to where we were. And the way it worked is you had an anchor point at each end. So we had an anchor point where we were, and she had an anchor point on her side. and there were ropes that were connected up above on this sign, and they were tied off right there. And you would swing and come up and land at that anchor point, and you'd set your anchor. Now you're here. You could release yourself, jump, and fall, and come back over to the other side and connect. Now you're anchored on that side. It was a very quick, efficient way to move from point A to B. And so we all did the jump, and that was quite a jump. That was a huge jump. And we jumped through that and we landed on the other side. And when I landed, Emma, we had trained for it. When we had trained in Boise, I had landed wrong on one of the landings and it had tweaked my back. And my uncle knew this, and they knew when it happened because they'd been telling me to relax, relax, relax when you land because I was so tense. They said, you need to relax. And so I was too relaxed and I strained it in Boise during training. And then on this exercise, I was still relaxed too much and wham, and it hurt my back. And so we got me off of the line and it had strained it, but I was okay. I was like, no, I'm okay. We can still go through with operation, I'm not that bad off. And so we moved across the rooftop to where we had a shoot nest. And that's where they put me in the piece of equipment up there on top of the roof. And so they had a big piece of HVAC equipment, and they'd opened one of the louvers, and inside this piece of mechanical equipment was a rifle set up and a little area where I could lay down with that rifle. And so I was placed in this piece of mechanical equipment, and there was stuff moving around me. It wasn't very comforting being in there. And I was stuck in there for I don't know how long, hours. I was stuck in this thing. And it was all night. I don't know what time of night it was that I got there, but they put me in this thing and they sealed it back up, put the screws back in, and then they left. They went to their places, and that's where I was stationed. And I was in contact with them through my comms. I had a little, I had a vial with me, a vial to wake up, and my uncle gave me some blue potion of sleep before they closed me up, so that I would fall asleep. And so I fell asleep when they closed it up. And then when I woke up, the comms were going off, something was going on, and I woke up and my uncle talked to me and he told me to take the drug I had, the red drug, and I drank the drug, the potion they had given to me to wake up and get operational. And I can remember just being crammed in this thing. It was hot, it was loud, it was stuffy, it was awful. But you're programmed to deal with that. And so I was in there and we tested our comms, went through all that. And then it started to get closer. Now, during all of this, my uncle would say, I'll be back. I've got to talk to somebody else because he was also in contact with our Japanese counterparts. There were other people in Japan working with us. It wasn't just CIA. And so, in all of this, the way the CIA was going to get to Kumi, Emma, is there was a rival gang of the Yamaguchi Gumi, known as the Nakano Kai. I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation, but the Nakano Kai, and they were, I believe, an offshoot of the Yamaguchi Gumi, and they were a more violent group, and they wanted Takumi dead for some reason. And they had come to the CIA, and they had asked the CIA for help in killing Takumi. The CIA, who had been trying to find a good way to kill Takumi, said, great, what an awesome opportunity. They seized on it because now they had a cover. So you had these four guys of the Nakano Kai that were going to come in to the Oriental Hotel, which is where Takumi was going to be that day at that time that we were going to get rid of him. These four guys come in and they were going to shoot up the place, and I was supposed to hit Takumi through the window in the head as a sniper to ensure that he was dead, because the Nakano Kai was absolutely terrified of Takumi. If he would have lived through this assault, those four guys and their leaders, it would have been hell to pay. And so they wanted to guarantee he was dead. That's why they come to the CIA. Can you guarantee he'll die if we do this? And so they came in from the ground. So I get woke up and it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. They're coming in, they're coming in. And then all hell broke loose out of my scope. It just seemed like all hell broke loose. I was squared up on an individual. My optic was connected to a video recorder of some kind that was connected to a screen in my uncle's van, which was down in an alley there in Kobe. And so he could see through my scope from his van, which we would call his command center at that point, see what I was aiming at. And he directed my aim, told me who to hit at the moment he wanted me to hit it. And then I was made to fire. Now, when I fired, I blacked out. I instantly blacked out. Boom, blackout, gone. When I went hunting, when I was studying at the University of Idaho later in life, I went out hunting for deer. And I was up on a hill and I squared up on a deer and I almost passed out. I was like, oh my God, don't pass out, don't pass out, don't pass out. And I could never understand what was wrong with me. Why would I pass out just from squaring up on a deer? And that's why, because I was programmed to pass out after I fired the shot. They wanted me out, they wanted me immobile, because I don't know what the percentages are, but your movement from your shoot nest is what'll give you away after the shot is fired. They did not want me moving. They did not want me mobile, nothing. They just wanted me almost like I was dead. I just went out. I blacked out. The next thing I remember is being woken up. Now, I want to add, I don't know who I shot. I don't know if I hit Takumi. I don't know if I hit another individual. I believe he was a dentist. His name, I believe, Hiroshi Harai. And that individual was killed in the exchange in the Oriental Hotel. Because when I would talk to my uncle later in a different memory about this, my uncle would tell me, I didn't kill Takumi. I killed an innocent bystander, a dentist who was there at the scene. This is what my uncle would tell me. But I was supposed to kill that man if I killed him. That's who they would have wanted me to kill. It's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. They're constantly messing with your head. So I was woke up. They got me out of that thing, out of that piece of HVAC equipment. It was daylight. It was broad daylight. I said, what the hell's going on? It is broad daylight. We are not supposed to move like this. And they said, no, we got to move. We got to move now. There's no time to wait. The police had already been to the rooftop. They already knew something was up and they were going to come back with dogs. And so we had to get off of the roof fast. This roof had flat spots on it. So there were spots that were flat where you could walk on it. And so we got down, we got off the roof in the descent. So when I did the pendulum swing this time, it was broad daylight. I can remember being like, oh my, like, I don't know who's going to see this. And just out I went across this massive expanse of space. And we made our way down. But on my way down, Emma, there are two individuals out there in the world. And I pray to God they're still alive. I don't know who they were. They saw me coming down with my suction cup devices because that's what I was using to come down by myself. Kat had to go and start taking stuff apart. She was in charge of disassembling the whole thing before the dogs and the police came back. And I was going down, and these two individuals, I went past their window because I could see people inside this building as I'm walking down it with these suction cups. And these two guys open the window and they're yelling at me in Japanese. And they're in suits, and I'm hanging there, and I'm in contact with my uncle. And I said, there's these two guys, and they're yelling at me. And he said, "Tell him you're a window washer." And he told me how to say it in Japanese, that I was a window washer. I'm a window washer. And I told them that, and it didn't seem to satisfy them. They kept yelling and waving. And he said, "Get down, just get down right now." And so we got down. Long story short, I ended up getting out of the city. We left the city. We got back to the airport. Um, got back to the airport on the plane, and the luggage handlers in Japan, they thought that we had killed Takumi, the whole storyline that we'd been there to kill him, and they congratulated us. And they were told they couldn't talk to me. I was made to get back in the van because I'd gotten out for a minute, and they loaded me back on the plane. And Kat wasn't there. She didn't come back. She didn't make it back to the plane. And that worried the shit out of me. Oh my, where's Kat? Because we were close. I I hope she's okay. And we left Japan, and we left Japan without her. And we flew back to Boise. And when we got back to Boise, the older luggage handler that had burned me with the cigarette, he wasn't there anymore. He'd been fired, and just the younger guy was there. And we got back over. My uncle just kept giving me drugs. He asked me what I wanted because we had our favorite drugs, the ones we really enjoyed. And because you're a mind slave and all that, you've been doing that. You've been conditioned for that since as far back as I can remember. It was just potions to us. So me and the younger luggage handler kid that had been there before and witnessed these things, he didn't want to talk to me at all anymore. Because the other guy, he was fired. He didn't know what was going to happen to him. And got we got back over to the airport to the luggage area and unloaded stuff. And I can remember being back at the waiting area, just sitting there reading my Bible, just buzzing hard on those drugs. And my uncle came and told me, you're going to forget all this. And, basically that was it. And he left, and then I sat there a while longer, and then I left and went out to my van. When I got to my van, just got in. I drove over to the place where you give your ticket to the parking attendant. I handed it to him. He told me some amount that I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "That's way too much. How can that be?" And he said, "Well, you've been here for 3 days." I said, 3 days? I haven't been here for days. As I perceived it, I'd been there for hours. In my mind, I had started to forget all those things. All those things were gone. Now I was just going home from work. I had the weekend off. I was going to go and just relax for the weekend before I started my work in Nampa at Noodles. And no, I paid the bill for parking, and I was so confused. I was like, how can this be? But part of me just covered it up again. They build personalities in your subconscious that are layered, that one layer wants to cover up the other layers. And so those layers just help cover it up and drive home. And as I'm driving home, I'm driving past the Boise Mormon Temple, another trigger to forget. And I got home, and my buddy Chris showed up. My buddy Chris Knutson, he was the other individual that they were thinking about using in the as a sniper for it. And we were friends, and he was at the house, and everyone was saying that I'd been off with Chris doing something like all weekend. And I was like, weekend? I was so confused. Weekend? I was with Chris. And the whole cover story was that I'd been with Chris and we'd been gone somewhere. And Chris was backing up the story because he was a mind slave. And my work had called because in the restaurant industry, people are always calling in sick, trying to look for someone to cover their shift. And so the manager at either the Nampa or Boise location, I believe it was the Nampa location, had been trying to get a hold of me because they needed me to cover some shifts that weekend. Now that I was good to just start working all the time. And my dad was like, your work is pissed. You need to call him. Where have you been? So he's working at covering all this up. So I call work and they're like, where have you been? I'm like, I guess I was out somewhere. Like, I have no idea. Oh, it was insane, Emma. And so, yeah, then life just went on as normal. And I wouldn't begin to remember these things. And then later, couple months later, it was the fall. It would be arranged that we would get rid of that luggage handler guy when my grandpa came back from his mission for the Mormon church, because he'd been out of town during this whole operation, like I mentioned earlier. And so when he came back from Texas from his mission, it was the first night he was back. I don't believe anyone even knew he was back. And we went and we got rid of that guy. And we dressed as Mormon missionaries. There was four of us. Yep, that's one way we disguise ourselves is we just straight up dress like Mormon missionaries. And so two of us, me and another younger gentleman who was in a bloodline family and was a trauma-based mind slave, and a friend of mine, David, we went over to this gentleman's house. We knocked on the door. Gentleman opened the door. First thing he did was look at me and said, "You." And he punched me so hard, Emma, it knocked me out. I got knocked out right there on his doorstep. And that's a whole nother story for a whole nother discussion. But we've been talking for quite a while. I should probably close on these things. So that was my experience in Japan. There's a lot more in there. People can read about it in my journaled memories, both on my website or in my book, and they're welcome to. It's Masaru Takumi and Kobe, Japan. And so it talks a lot about the manipulations of our world and how these things occur and the processes and who's involved and how it works. Our last discussion, we talked about blackmail. And so these blackmailing operations are important for gaining access to such things as the people who control the Boise airport so that it is an asset to you and your operations. So these things are being used in our world, not just in this country, but globally. And there's a lot going on, and people don't understand it. And so the reason I talk about these things isn't because I'm trying to be a rat. I wish that these things we had done when I was operational were good and that they were for the benefit of the country and the people, but they weren't. It was mass murder of the people in Japan. It was murder of men, two men who I can't judge because I don't know. And it was the murder of an American citizen on American soil after the event to help cover it all up. It is so convoluted and so disgusting. Things are illegal that they're doing, unconstitutional, and immoral. They are against God's will. God's intent was never for his children to lose their free will and be used in these ways. It's disgusting what these people who consider themselves to be men of science or men of religion and God, magicians of God, they are disgusting and they need to be exposed. A lot of these things, we just talked about a lot of classified information, Emma, things that the CIA, Pentagon, and the White House don't want getting out. That particular operation was approved by President Bill Clinton. It was approved by the president, that operation. It was planned and executed by the Pentagon through the CIA, and it is disgusting. And so these things have to be exposed. They're hidden behind what they consider to be national security. You have the 1947 National Security Act, which are covering up the events I just told you about. You have the 1949 Central Intelligence Agency Act, also actively working at covering it up. These are laws, mechanisms in the government that are not, they are not invincible. Through law and through public awareness, these things can be changed. We can repeal these laws. We can repeal them. We can raise such a fuss within our government that they have to repeal them, and that we have to operate as a nation based on law and order, not covering up government crime. So to end, I just want to say there is hope. When I go through these things and through these years, it feels like I'm just beating on a brick wall that must be 100 feet thick, but it's not immobile. There is hope. If we can raise conscious awareness through these discussions, through our websites, through our books, then people can become aware. They can make decisions about how they want to be ruled by their government, if they want to be ruled by their government, if they want to be ruled by the government leaders who are almost all corrupt and involved with this disgusting trauma-based mind control, because it's not specific to the CIA. It's not specific to the Pentagon or the White House. It is a huge thing. And these people know about it. And shame on them for not talking about it. Shame on them for not bringing awareness. If we want national security, we've got to expose these things. We can do that through truth, through sharing it, and through the people getting knowledge of it. And so I pray for the soul of this nation. I pray for the people. And I hope that someday humanity will look back and say, fixed, we have the courage to fix it. Because if we don't, we're done. The soul of this nation is lost. So I pray that the people can wake up. We can end this, because there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on. I would advise people to read my website, buy my book, read it. Read Kathy's book, read Eliza E.'s book, read Nathan Reynolds' work. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of information that you can follow. So do your research, learn what's going on. Yep. Thank you, Emma. That's my book there. It can be found at mormonmonarch.com under the section Simply Purchase Book. And I have it up through Lulu because it's an easy way for me to distribute it in the population. So you can go there, you can purchase it. I put it up for sale. Right now it's up for sale through the month of July. I'm able to do that periodically in order to save people costs. So the full price is $27.77, but you just watch for a sale. It'll be on sale, or go to my website. Much of what's in my book is available for free on my website. If you have a mind free enough to think for itself and to seek out this information, it's available. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you at no cost, other than it's going to blow your mind and it's going to shatter your reality. So I will pray for that, and I pray that people look into these things because there's a lot of stuff. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, JR. Thank you for sharing those painful memories with us. It really shines a light on what's happening behind the scenes. You're one story out of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions that have went through these programs, and to hear the types of things that they're using one person for, and then you think about all the people in there and the different things that they're being used for, and it's like almost inconceivable to think about how much crime is being done every day using
Uh,
innocent people that they're taking their lives from. And like you said, they're not granting them the consent or the ability to even remember what they're doing. And so it's really important that we do talk about this because it's horrible that people don't even have a say in committing crime and that
yeah,
innocent lives are being taken to help cover up these things that they're doing to innocent children like you. We're committing crime illegally under national security on the backs of children at the end of the day. And that's a horrific thought to consider and to think about how much crime in so many different ways, using so many different innocent people, is happening on a daily basis to protect cowards who like to hurt kids.
traitors, cowards and traitors.
Yes, and your book is absolutely incredible. If people can purchase it, I really encourage you to. JR's not in this to make a ton of money. He's not in this to get attention, like he said. He's in this to bring awareness, and it's a way to immortalize this information by purchasing it in a book. My podcasts have been terminated. They can terminate websites, but they can't terminate a book. These are ways that this information can be eternalized and can be given to other people so they can have it at home and refer to it and learn. So I really encourage you guys to buy his book if you can. It is on Lulu. I'll have that in the show notes, and then you guys can also get to it through his book, mormonmonarch.com. There's just a tab at the top, purchase book. And then you guys can have access to all of his memories that he has documented on here as well. Some that we went through today, others that we went through on other episodes, some that we haven't talked about at all on here. So you guys can go through this and learn. He does a phenomenal job breaking down this. These are long form. Every one is pretty much a book. You could make a book out of every memory individually, but really important stuff. And it's a wonderful way to get to know JR more. An easy thing you guys can do, like he said, if purchasing a book is out of your budget, go through and read those writings that he's um, written for us on his website. And then also a way that you can support him is take the website whenever you guys click on a memory, go to one, copy and paste the memory if it impacted you, and go share it on your social media and talk about it. Bring people to his website, then they can find where they can purchase his book. They can go through and read this. So it's a really easy way too, if purchasing the book isn't something you're able to do, help share his memories and share it on your social media and bring people to his content. These are really important memories and information that he's posting here. So there's many ways that you guys can support. I was telling JR, one of the most common things that I get asked is, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And of course, supporting survivors' work is one way. Sharing these podcast episodes is another, and others that they do on other platforms. But a lot of survivors have websites, they have blogs, and sharing that can be instrumental in helping drive traffic to them so that way other people can find their work and we can educate more people on this. So if you guys could do that, that would mean the world to me. I'm going to have his website. It's just www.mormonmonarch.com. I'll have that in the show notes. You guys can type that in your search bar as well. It's pretty easy to find. But please share his website and help bring awareness. Please share his book. Again, even if you guys can't purchase it at this time, and especially if you do, post the link to his book so other people can find it and help promote it. Really, really easy ways that you guys can support. There's always a way that we can support either for free or very little money. So I really encourage you guys to purchase this. For those people listening, I will be doing a contest. that I'll announce on my social media, giving away a free book of JR's that he was so generous
Nice.
to donate. So I'll have that as well, and I'm excited to do that. So keep an eye out, follow me on, I'll have it on YouTube, I'll announce it, and on my social media pages, my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook. I'll have a contest that I'll run alongside JR, and we'll be giving away a free copy of his book to one of you. So stay tuned for that as well. And then JR, is there anything else that you wanted to share or close with today before we wrap up?
Thank you, Emma. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you do to help bring light to these things. Because without people like you, without people trying to help in this fight, you know, so thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all your viewers. Chatted with some of them online before, and they were wonderful. Thank you.
It's my great honor, and I'm so happy that more and more people are finding you and supporting you, and it's wonderful to have you on. I wish, and I can't wait to have conversations about you getting justice and, more positive things, but in its own way, talking about these horrible things is serving a really positive impact that's going to last the test of time and hopefully create a big impact, either now in small ripples or in big ways in the future. So no matter what, just talking about this is creating an impact, and it is a wonderful thing, even though it's so difficult and hard to hear these things, to contend with them, and of course on your end to talk about them. So I'm grateful to have you here, JR. You're welcome on any time. We can't wait to have you back. Like I said, you're so beloved by our community and appreciated. And for everybody listening, like JR said, we couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are really the cornerstone of helping move the snowball and help this movement grow. We could talk here, but if we had nobody listening, we'd just be talking into a void. So I really appreciate you guys reaching out to JR and encouraging him or sharing how he impacted you, or your own puzzle pieces to contribute to his story. You guys can connect with him right on his page. He has a contact tab as well. So if you guys want to reach out to him, I forgot to mention that you guys can connect with him right from his website. And I encourage you guys to, even if it's just how he's impacted you, and sharing some words of encouragement to him, that can go a really far way too. So I'll have all those links in the show notes. You guys stay tuned for a contest to win a free copy of JR's book. I'm really excited to do this alongside him. We couldn't do this without you guys. Like I said, thank you with all of our hearts. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Emma.